As we await Stage 2 of OWCS, I believe it's important between every break to look back and properly evaluate and critique how all of the partner teams have done through each stage. I believe it is very fair to put them under the biggest spotlight and be the harshest with them because they're the ones who are getting the most resources, therefore they should try and be successful. And if you don't reach that benchmark and you disappoint, then you deserve to be criticized for it. But on the other side of things, for those who are successful, it's worth acknowledging their achievements. Let's take a look at how all 8 partner teams did through the first stage and give them a letter grade for their performance. Starting with the obvious one at hand, Crazy Raccoon have knocked it out of the park so far. Has this team been flawless or as dominant compared to last year, let's say? No. Absolutely not, but I think in other ways they've made up for it, and if anything, they've become a better team. The question heading into this season was, how do they deal with being losers, coming short of their goals, getting rolled by their rivals and Falcons on that grand stage? And they were able to respond pretty well. They had a very solid regular season, fairly dominant for the most part, and they went to 3 finals, everyone that they could have been a part of. They won Korea, they won Champions Clash, and they got second in the Asia final. And I think they've learned some very valuable lessons late into that first stage that could help them go a long way. Losing to Nightmare the way they did really seemed like a big-time wake-up call for this team. They were expecting to cruise through the Champions Clash tournament all the way up until Falcons. That was the only opponent they were truly focusing on. And a team like Nightmare came along and humbled them. Those experiences go a long way, especially when you properly apply them, get your rematch, beat them, and then go on to win a championship like we just saw in Stage 1. I think Crazy Raccoon did everything right, and in my opinion, this might have been their most impressive run to date, even if it wasn't as dominant as other ones before. Obviously, you want to win big, but being this turbo-dominant God Squad, sometimes that's not the most important thing. I think there's a lot of value that comes with grit, taking on big challenges, pushing back, and showing that you have that mental determination to clear any hurdle. Crazy Raccoon did that in full throughout Stage 1, and that's really big for them. You've got to show improvement. They do have a lot of absolutely amazing players, but if you don't show improvement, you're going to be left behind. That's how it's always been in Overwatch esports. It is a constantly evolving game, and Crazy Raccoon have yet again shown us that they are more than up to the task. I give them an A for their performance in Stage 1. Very well done. Looking into their adversaries in Falcons, I thought they did just fine. I wasn't blown away by them, but yet again, it was kind of just the same old story with them. They mostly coast through the regular season. It's all about the big tournament games, and that's always when they seem to show up and put up a great fight. They got one in Asia. They held their own always, and I think they also showed some improvements. I thought that Stalker, first and foremost, took another step in his game. He's always been an amazing player. He showed that especially in the finals last year, but he seems to be taking it a step further. Him and Proper can just play anything they want to at any given time. There's no overlap with the hero pool. The flexibility is insane. He's playing less of the flex, more of the hit scan this year, and he still looks like an absolute god out there, holding his own even against the elite like Lip on Sojourn. Not an easy thing to do at all. He just looks like the MVP out there to me. And I feel like all the players have shown improvement. They've shown good motivation despite winning a championship last year, changing up their coaching staff as well. Falcons have faced plenty of challenges as well, and they've passed most of them with flying colors. Now, unfortunately for them, the big problem seems to be Crazy Raccoon again. They've lost to them more than they've beaten them so far, but it's still early. They've got their eye on the prize of winning late in the season, just like last year. It's only the beginning. I'd like to see them push a little bit harder early on, but hey, if this helps them avoid that burnout and they can perform when it matters, it's all good. They're showing good improvement as a team. They're still capable of being winners. I like that they're confident in just about any hero matchup with their adversaries. Falcons are in a good place. They weren't perfect, they lacked consistency at times, but this team is still terrifying, and I'd be pretty satisfied if I was a Falcons fan. I'm giving them a B+. Then the waters start to get a little bit more murky. Let's talk Zeta Division, and fair warning, I've got a lot of not so nice things to say, and deservedly so, because on this whole topic of improvement, this theme that we saw with Falcons and Crazy Raccoon, Zeta have shown none of it. They have stagnated, and it's very disappointing to see. This felt like the stage to put themselves on the map. You have a chip on your shoulder after coming up short constantly last year. Falcons made some big changes with their teams, maybe some things you can exploit to get into that top 2 range, but they just couldn't close the gap. And it sucks to sit here thinking that way, because at first, that wasn't the case. It really did seem like they showed improvements, and the gap was closed. They were competitive throughout their Stage 1 qualifiers, and when it mattered in the Korea seeding decider, they beat Falcons and Crazy Raccoon. They beat them both in the same weekend. That's really hype. Not to mention some of the individual improvements with the team. The backline looked a lot more consistent compared to 1 year prior. It seemed like Pelican was now fully integrated onto the DPS line, and they were all holding their weight as a really good trio. Just a solid looking team, and this seemed like their best opportunity. They gained that confidence beating those top teams, but that's where they peaked. In the seeding decider, which generally isn't all that important. After that, nothing to look forward to the rest of the way, and it felt like the same Zeta that we had to watch over and over again throughout last year. In the most meaningful games, where the stakes are at their highest, they just don't show up. And I felt like this is even worse compared to some of their other appearances in similar situations. They got absolutely demolished by Crazy Raccoon and Team Falcons in the Asia playoffs. 4-0'd by both of them. Not even close. It's the same thing time after time, where there's an obvious gap and they just lack a clutch gene against some of these teams that are way, way better than them. This team is stuck in purgatory. They're the 3rd place version of the Fusion, and their best opportunity to date has slipped out of their grasp, and now things are more uncertain than they ever have been before. Zeta not only is absolutely shattered when it comes to confidence at this point, you'd like to assume, but also they're incorporating a new player onto their roster for the first time since Pelican joined, and this is pretty different because this is a full-time starter we're talking here. Violet is officially off the team, they let him go, his contract expired, and now they're left with a hole at the main support position. And say what you want about Violet, but he's still one of the best to ever do it, and replacing someone like that is not easy. There aren't really any better options out there, at least right now on paper, for this main support position. So not only are Zeta down in the dumps with their confidence, but now they're simply a worse team than they were before, arguably. They're going to have to dig themselves out of a massive hole, and they certainly have a lot to prove. Zeta are failing greatly, and I could not be more disappointed. My grade for them is a D. And finally, there's T1, the new kids on the block, and generally not all that much to say. Expectations were not sky high for this team. They weren't expected to be world beaters. Maybe they could compete for number 3, but nobody thought they'd be any better than that. Top 4 seemed like their peak, and they weren't even able to get that. They were clearly the 5th best team. They were right in the middle of the pack. They were the only partner team to not hit that top 4 landmark. They weren't even better than Wei, losing to them in both attempts they had against them. It wasn't great to see them fall so short, especially again because they are a partner team and more is expected of them, especially from a prestigious org like T1, but it just wasn't there. Very up and down throughout this season. There are things to dislike, also some things that were pretty promising as well. On the positive side of things, they were competitive against some good teams at times. Would have liked to see them do a bit better against Wei, but they did have a competitive outing against Falcons and some other relatively decent squads, and you have to appreciate the efforts of Donghack at times, and the emergence of Proud as well, looking like a very promising hit scan, a gem for this T1 team, the best I've seen him play in his career so far, and that's a great thing to take away from the stage and hopefully something you can build around heading into the future. But with the bad, along with coming up short to Wei and not making the Asia tournament, there's also the fact that they didn't place all that high in the Korea qualifier standings and that some games were a lot closer than they should have been. Just a lot of inconsistencies in things they need to work on. A lot of growth has to happen with this team, and that's unfortunately how things go when you're inexperienced, when you're so new playing together as a team. But I think they got some of that valuable experience, and there's a chance for them to get better moving forward. I can't give them too high of a grade, but at least there were some good takeaways, so I'll say it was about an average performance. I'll go with a C. That's all for Korea, so let's talk about North America, starting off with Spacestation Gaming. And they did just about as good as you'd hope. They took care of business. They made it to China. They were the top team for basically all of NA, only losing 2 games. I would have liked to see them beat Nightmare and not lose to them the way they did, but that was kind of a weird game. Off days happened. I think in a rematch things could possibly go different for them, but they took care of business, being pretty dominant throughout most of North America, going 6-1 in the qualifiers, and showing that this team has a lot of promise to maybe be the best in the West. They haven't reached it yet, but it's still early on in the year. Sugarfree still at the top of his game. I thought him and Seeker were a good little 1-2 punch, and I thought Kellen, despite entering another kind of weird mixed environment, did very well for himself and looked like one of the better tanks out of NA so far. SSG achieved a decent bit in their first stage together. Top 2 in NA is good, guaranteeing that Champions Clash spot, getting past the first round, and then even looking decent against once again. It was a slow start for them, but as that series progressed, they looked a lot more competitive and showed they can hold their own. I think with time, they can evolve even more as a team if they can unleash that true potential, what their ceiling is really capable of, and maybe get top 3 in a tournament. It's not going to be easy. There's a lot of other very worthy adversaries that could take that spot from them, but they've got a shot with the skill level that they've demonstrated so far. It's just a matter of working on those weaknesses, protecting their backline better, and then on top of it all, I just want to see that flexibility show some improvement. That was a big issue for them. It cost them a couple of different series, like in the once again matchup, throwing things at the wall, a lot of things not working for a while. We saw it with Nightmare as well, where they kind of just ran circles around them. They need to do better with that flexibility in practicing multiple compositions. I think if they can improve upon those things, we'll see them play even better. I would have liked to see them get first place in NA, but they didn't do half bad for their first stage. Let's give them a B. And then there's Team Liquid, and I swear I'm not just saying this because I'm a fan of them, but the fact is, they were pretty disappointing in Stage 1, clearly having a lot of things to work on. The potential of this team is through the roof to be one of the best in the West, but they haven't reached that level yet. The coaching needs to get to work and have them improve upon some of these huge issues that have reared its ugly head over and over again so far. A lack of communication, being not the greatest at certain comps, like the Hazard, for example, and just letting a lot of other NA teams bully them and have their way with them. It's not like they only lost to Spacestation and that's it. That wouldn't be that big of a deal, but they lost to both Nightmare and Timeless, which to me isn't the greatest look in the world. You're supposed to be better than them, not just because you're a partner team, but because your roster on paper just looks better. The talent on this team has the upside to be absolutely crazy. Vega and RuPaul were winners last year. Knife has so much untapped potential as a DPS player. Tree is only getting started as a hit scan. Infected is easily one of the better Western players we have at his position. There's a lot to like with this team, but they just could not put 2 and 2 together. They lost 3 games in Stage 1, and none of them were to SSG. That to me is pretty disappointing. I feel like that's the only team you should be losing to. No offense to Nightmare, obviously they are insane, but going into Stage 1, that's how it felt. They should clearly be number 1 or number 2. But that just wasn't the case. Very disappointing. In my opinion, the Western version of Zeta, where they can't beat any of the relevant teams, and that's all that should really matter in the end. They should have been in China. That was the big goal. I know they have a lot to work on, but there's no reason why this team shouldn't be capable of at least making it to an international tournament. And now they're clearly number 3 at best in their region heading into Stage 2, and they're going to be underdogs despite being a partner team, despite having such rich talent on this roster, and that doesn't sit very well with me. Obviously, this team is going for the vision of the future. You've got to look past one stage to see what they're capable of, because by the time this season ends, if all the pieces kind of click into place, they should be a really good team. But that's the question. Are they going to reach that goal? This stage is very important. It'll be very telling to decide if they're really worthy of competing in Stockholm later this year. And they've got their work cut out for them. This is a rough situation for Liquid to be in. And as a fan of them, I'm hoping they can turn things around, but I don't know how optimistic I am right now. They were a big time letdown. I'm going with a D. And that leaves us with EMEA, the final 3 partner teams. The one that was very successful in this situation was Virtus Pro. undefeated in EU, not dropping a single game, and mostly looking pretty dominant along the way. You really can't ask for much more, especially when you consider that this team wasn't necessarily supposed to be the favorite to be the best in this region, even top 2 in some people's eyes, like myself. I didn't think they'd be top 2, but they blew away all expectations, and they're a very big step ahead of the rest of the region, at least for right now, at least with what we saw in Stage 1. I'm pretty happy with what I saw. You didn't lose a game, didn't drop in your own region, you got first place in your tournament, and you at least progressed past the first round in Hangzhou, China as well. The roster showed to be well-rounded, and everybody held their own weight. I was really impressed with Jaewoo, as was most fans, I would argue. He had a lot of potential in Korea, and he cashed in on it big time here in EU, looking like arguably the MVP of the region so far, and an absolute mad lad on gen.g. There's not much you can complain about when it comes to a regional perspective of this team. Well coached and consistent throughout, and clearly a big time step ahead of like all of their competition. But that brings me to the next point. How can they evolve and get better? A lot of it starts with trying to close the gap in some of these other fast-paced dive metas that maybe go a bit away from their comfort, those slow-paced Orisa and Mauga comps that let them be so successful in the first stage. I don't know what they've got to do. Maybe you break out another tank player on this team for Winston purposes. That could be a start, but in general, they've got to learn to be more flexible as a team if they want to make it to that next step, because some of these teams were just running circles around them. They're way more flexible, they're outpacing them, and Virtus Pro at times looked lost out there on that international stage. Hopefully the experience from this tournament helped them understand that, and they can work on those issues. You really can't ask for too much more outside of improving some of those things. The best ability in this game is flexibility, but I have confidence they can learn some of those things. There's a possibility there could be some struggles in Stage 2. Maybe the gap does start to get closed a little bit, depending on the meta, but they know what they have to do to win. They've already started off on the right foot, and I'm pleasantly surprised with how dominant they were in EU. So I'll give Virtus Pro an A-. That surprise factor really brings up that grade for me. Very impressed with them, but I don't have nearly as many nice things to say about gen.g and Twisted Minds. Starting with gen.g, they were just alright. They felt like a weird team on paper, and that's precisely what they were. Now, in their defense, they went 5-2 in the qualifiers, which isn't too shabby. I thought Mag in a mixed environment did pretty well, honestly looking like the leader of this team most of the time. I thought Son on Top Dragon did well. The backline at least held their own at times, a bit up and down, but they had their moments. There was a lot to like and some things to dislike, but that's how Krusty-led teams kind of go in the modern era. Sometimes they do some really head-scratching things with comp choices and decision-making, but other moments they're beating teams that they really shouldn't. It was a pretty important year for some of these guys to show out, and they most certainly did. Not to mention Coach Krusty, this was pretty big for his legacy, showing that he could lead a new team with much less talent than what he's accustomed to. Felt like he was able to do that reasonably well. It wasn't horrible. They had some good moments, and they were generally exciting to watch, but the inconsistencies were pretty brutal. The decision-making, like I said, questionable. And unfortunately for them, when it came to prime time in the tournament, they did really, really bad. Getting 3-0'd by Twisted Minds and then getting beat by the best team in EU, Virtus Pro. They didn't win a single game in the bracket, which means they've got a lot to work on. We need to see better consistency, better decision-making, better choices with the compositions. The backline I'd like to see take another step in the right direction. I thought they got better as time went on during the stage after a not-so-great start. And we need to see how they do with a brand new DPS line in action. They got rid of Sauna on Top Dragon. They've moved on to exoDoin and Who Are You? And that means a new challenge of incorporating new players. Not always the easiest thing to do, even if you could argue the DPS line's in a better situation talent-wise. Krusty's got his work cut out for him with this team, and I'm curious to see where he goes from here with this squad, but the good news is maybe they don't have as much pressure as other partner teams out there, for the simple fact that their expectations weren't necessarily that high coming into this season. I think it's about incorporating the new guys, getting more of an identity, and being a more consistent team in Stage 2. If they miss out on another land, then so be it. But if they get those improvements down and they become more confident, then maybe they can put it all together in Stage 3 when it matters the most. Overall, though, I left feeling like I wanted more with this gen.g team. They couldn't really deliver, so I'm going to say they get a C. And finally, there's Twisted Minds, who were inarguably to me the most disappointing partner team in all of the West. This team on paper looked promising, but something just felt wrong right off the bat. They got off to such a poor start. They clawed their way back and made things interesting to be a part of the tournament and not be completely and utterly trash, but they didn't really beat anyone of importance to me. Not a lot of quality wins under their belts. And in the matches that really mattered, things felt pretty sloppy. Some of their players looking lost out there. Hadi, unfortunately, as he gets let go of here and looks for a new team, looked very confused at times. Not a great Hazard player by any means. He really struggled to keep up, leading to his benching to TVNT, and I don't really think he was anything amazing either. I thought that they looked better with him out there, but he's not necessarily a top-level tank player. It's good to have competent tank play that helps, but it's only going to get you so far if you don't have the star power there, and to me, it just feels like they're lacking there for sure. I also thought this backline wasn't totally in sync, and they did a poor job of protecting court. This dude played well when he was able to, when the opportunities presented itself, but it oftentimes felt like he was being hard focused by other teams, and then Twisted Minds would crumble under the pressure. They just had no other options. It was courts or nothing for the most part, and that's just not a winning formula, no matter how good this guy is at the game. Not many good results to look at for Twisted Minds. 4-3 in the qualifier. I mean, they beat Peps when they were kind of hot. They got that win over Ultimates, who were just struggling back then. And they beat Gen.g, who are still nowhere near what their max potential is as well. So I left feeling like I wanted a lot more from this team, and they have so much to do if they want to be that team that we know them for that was so competitive last year. And it starts with making changes with their roster, which is exactly what they're doing, getting rid of Hadi, getting rid of Irony. Hopefully that's a spark to get them more on the same page. Twisted Minds are a partner team, and their org generally has been so dominant the last couple of years in EU. I was hoping to see more knowing that reputation, but they were a major letdown. This wasn't the greatest roster they've ever assembled in their history, but I simply expected more from Twisted Minds. I thought top 2 was very doable, and they couldn't reach that goal, and then some. They were actually pretty boring to watch at times, a head scratcher, and that just means they've got so much to work on if they want to regain their former glory. I'll be curious to see how they adjust in Stage 2, because they've got a long ways to go if they want to catch up to some of the best. Final grade, D-. And that is going to wrap up my evaluation of how all 8 partner teams did in the first stage of OWCS 2025. I'm curious to see how this video will age heading into Stage 2. Hopefully the teams I talked down on will play better, while the others remain relatively consistent. Let me know how you think the partner teams did in their first stage down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it so much if you could give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more OWCS talks just like this. Peace.